Hello all, and welcome back to a new season of TV and Us, a conversation show about the TV series we just can't stop talking about. My name is Jennifer Hahn.
And I'm Sarah Callan.
Each season, we focus on a different show, reviewing it episode by episode, and we invite you to watch along with us. Right now, we are going to be covering Dune Prophecy, and today we are on the very first episode of the season, titled The Hidden Hand. If you haven't watched it yet, this is your spoiler alert. Please check it out before continuing to listen to the rest of today's episode. Okay, Sarah, kick us off with a summary of episode 1.
On Wallach 9, young Valia Harkonnen promises Mother Superior Raquella that she'll protect the sisterhood by putting one of their own on the Imperial throne. 30 years later, Valia faces a threat to her long-awaited plan.
All right. So here on TV and Us, we have a little tradition we like to do to kick off the episode, which is sharing our episode titles of choice for the episode that we are going to be covering. So, Sarah, what is your episode title?
Mine is Uniquely Useful.
Oh, well done. Well done. That's great. My episode title is Bloodlines.
Yes, that's kind of important in this.
Mm-hmm. It's the whole
Just
reason
a minor
this whole
detail.
thing exists, really. Okay, well, let's dive in to episode 1. And maybe before we actually share all of our thoughts about the episode, some backstory first on, were you excited for the show, how you feel about the Dune universe in general, and then how that might shape your thoughts about this first episode of the season.
Yeah, I was really excited about this show. So after the first Dune movie came out, I was so intrigued that I then read the book, Dune, and I was really impressed with it. The world building is great, but the part of the story and the characters that I was most interested in were the Bene Gesserit. It was so cool to read about these women who were just pulling the strings behind the scenes and wielding all of this power in really interesting ways. And I just wanted to know more. I needed to know so much more than what is in that book. And so I have been very excited about this series to come out, just because these are the characters that I've been wanting to know more about. So I'm curious to see how we learn more about them and how the story is going to unfold as we get further into it. But I'm pretty pumped about this.
So overall thoughts about episode 1 is you're excited? It worked for you? You're intrigued?
Yeah, so I think at first I was a little, because it's really exposition heavy at first, and I was like, oh no, am I gonna be disappointed? There was a moment where I was like, oh no, I might not get everything that I hoped for. But by the end, that cliffhanger left me with enough questions and enough for me to okay, I'm excited about the next episode and to see kind of what's going on here, because some new things have been introduced and things aren't quite going to plan for Valia. So I'm intrigued to learn more about what's going on here.
All right. Well, the first episode of a season, that's the main objective that it needs to accomplish. It sounds like it's working for you. Love it. Love it. I was also very excited for this show. I mean, it's fascinating to see in the Dune movies and the Dune story how much the Bene Gesserit are really calling so many shots, and so many of the key plot points are dependent on some choices that they make as they're meddling. And the concept of this sisterhood of women that are so cunning, so capable, wildly intelligent, calling the shots and pulling the strings is just such a great concept. So heck yeah, we're ready for some of that. This first episode, I think, is not working for me totally yet for most of it, but the last 10 minutes of the episode really gives me hope for where this is going to go. And perhaps this is just the case of the exposition first episode of any show where they need to establish all of the characters and they need to introduce some plot lines. And in general, I think it's challenging to cover the Dune universe and try and bring in maybe existing viewers or new viewers on like who these people are and how the world works. So there's some tall challenges that this show definitely faces for a first episode, more so than any other type of show with a world like this. But on the whole, I think that there's some choices made in the structure and some of the character development and the focus that I have some feelings about. So on the whole, I'm like not totally invested in all of these characters yet. And I think the most interesting part of my intrigue is about Desmond Hart. And you know, for a show about women, I want my intrigue to be about the women, not about the man in this storyline. So I just think there's some like potential like character building choices that perhaps will be solved for as we continue on this journey. But so far, I was hoping for something a little bit stronger.
Yeah, I think my biggest interest is in Desmond too, which
Right?
it's just wild because like, how did he do that?
Where did he learn
How did he
it from?
murder a child and this woman who's on another planet at
Yeah.
the same time?
Mhm.
So I think that is just filled with intrigue about, okay, what's going on? And I think the other thing that I'm just most interested in is not so much any of the characters, but just the larger structure of this sisterhood and how it's wielding its influence and kind of how it came to be. I think because there were so many flashbacks in this one, I wonder if there's going to continue to be flashbacks throughout the show, and we'll see how Valia was able to like build this thing. So I think I am more interested in like the macro pieces right now and not really invested in a character yet because it's only the first episode. Like I'm not attached yet to anybody. So we'll see how they choose to weave this story. But yeah, I agree. It's kind of disappointing that Desmond is the most interesting character and he is the reason why I'm excited to watch the next episode.
Yeah, which I'm like, in principle, the show about the Bene Gesserit, these badass women that are calling all the shots, like I want to be intrigued about the women. And there's some of the younger two girls that I'm kind of curious to see more of. They kind of set up some plot lines there and kind of the contrast between Valia and Tula and their ideologies, the way they think about making choices and amassing power and influence, and then their kind of loyalties or the kind of soft feelings they have towards these two girls that are also such polar opposites in how they show up in the world. One is very much more aggressive and outwardly displaying her power, and the other is described as a lamb, but is such an empath and is able to maybe have that quiet power, which I think is so aligned with how Tula is engaging in this environment. And so the dichotomies of like these older two women and kind of their protectiveness over the kind of younger versions of themselves, I think it's just like an interesting concept and would be really fun to tease out some of these larger ideas around influence, power, charisma, control, and how we can make all of these different choices around how we go about that. I think that would be really fascinating to see. I hope the show explores that.
And it seems like it's going to, because their personalities are so distinct and there's already some like tension and friction there between all of these characters. So it's a tee up to explore all of those. And I'm very curious to see what else we learn about Tula, because like Valia, you know who she is. Like, nailed it. We already get who she is, but I think there's a lot more to Tula than we've seen. So it's going to be fun to see like when she steps up and when she uses that power, or maybe seeing the ways that she can covertly influence her sister instead of trying to do it overtly. So she's one of those characters that I'm just very curious to see where the show takes her, because there's a lot of options with somebody like that.
I'm so curious about her because Valia is our like traditional protagonist, you know, very clear objective, incredibly fearless, lots of agency, willing to do what she needs to do. And clearly the power dynamic between these two sisters has always been Valia calls the shots and Tula kind of is her second in command. But there's a lot of conversations between the two of them where you see that Tula has a very clear sense of self, a sense of morality, and is also unafraid to speak up. And so, what will push her to the point where she's got to intervene at this point? And will she do it outrightly, or will she also pull her own behind the scenes strings to influence the course of events? And where are those like other loyalties that Tula has that she's building alliances on? I hope she's this like incredibly cunning, like almost under unassuming character that is undermined for a long time and then comes out with a full vengeance and ready to go to battle with her sister, who I'm sure over the course of the show will continue to become more and more diluted in kind of her ideology and vision that she seems to have been so loyal to for all these years.
Well, and I think with the death of Kasha, like that could be the push that Tula needs to finally, step up and challenge her sister, which would just be interesting to see, because we already know that there is a external force that is now threatening Valia's plan, but it's going to be interesting to see if she's also pushed from the inside. What will that look like when she has an external foe, and what she may perceive to be an internal foe? How would she resolve that? How is that going to push her and prod her and bring things out of her character that could be really interesting to explore?
Yeah, especially because that concept of anxiety driving some of the decision making for people in power, I think will be fun to see if the show chooses to go down that path, because Valia has been sitting on this prophecy that has been given to her since such a young age around this great power that will threaten the existence of the sisterhood. And now that she's seen that perhaps it's arrived on her doorstep, she might go real erratic after this. And I think that'll be really fun and exciting to see the way that potentially clouds her decision making or makes her a lot more intense and willing and kind of like unafraid about the consequences in the way that she chooses to move and make decisions from here.
Because we've already seen some really bold moves, some seemingly not great decisions have been made in service of this prophecy. So yeah, once she realizes that things have gone awry, I'm very curious to see, because she's such a strong personality. I feel like there's a lot of fun things that the writers could do with her character.
It's almost as if all of the game pieces are now on the board. The board has been created. The game pieces are set up. And I think episode 2 will really be indicative of how much trust I have in the show to give us a real good run of a story and some great plot points, or if it's still kind of wandering a little bit, and bopping back and forth between all of these different storylines, which are all going to be really fun to see play out. But I think if it's starting to lack a little bit of focus and development, then maybe it's maybe too ambitious to try and tackle so much over the course of the kind of runway that it has. So I think that we do a lot of bopping around to all of these different players on the board in this episode. So I'm intrigued to see the structure of episode 2.
Oh yeah, me too. Because this episode tries to accomplish a lot. Like we have to meet so many different characters and understand their relationship to each other, while also showing how this show is part of the Dune universe without being the same part of the Dune universe that we've seen before. Like there's a lot that this show is trying to accomplish, and there are so many characters, both in the present time and 30 years prior. So it's just it's a lot to try and do. So I am also curious about this next episode to see, okay, now that we know who everybody is, we know kind of some alliances, we know some motivations. Let's get to the story. Let's get to the action and see what happens. So I'm hoping that the second episode will show more of those things rather than more level setting and more exposition and all of that. I don't think we need more of that. We need to see these characters responding to what's happening in this time.
Yeah. There's so many moving pieces in here, and I hope that we get like more character moments. I think that's one of the things that I felt like I was wanting more of, and maybe that's just a product of having to put the game pieces on the game board. But each character almost feels like it's like we kind of know them, but I don't know who they are really. We've seen them say some things and make some small choices, but like, how are they wired? What do they want? What are they in this for? You know, I think there's so many questions about literally every character that feels unanswered. And so when they start colliding with each other, this will get really interesting. There's so many characters. It's crazy.
So many. Oh my God.
This is either going to be an incredibly well-woven web of intersecting storylines, or it's going to be a giant knot of chaos and lacks focus. One or the other.
Yeah. So we'll see. I'm hoping that they'll be able to bring it all together and tie it all together, but it is a lot. Like, number one, this is part of the Dune world, which it's just difficult to adapt to the screen. And then number two, there are just so many characters with all of these backstories and the different ways that they connect with one another and prophecies and different worlds and all of these things. So it is a lot. So it's going to be interesting to see how this show handles all of that.
And they've got 6 episodes total? That's not that much, man, you know? Like, what? I am skeptical and you are hopeful, and that's fun because we're flipped than we usually are.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll see how the next episode goes.
The next episode will be very telling because we'll be literally past the 1/3 mark of this entire plot line. So we gotta get this train going, you know? Yeah.
Yep. Real quick and in a hurry. So we got a lot of ground to cover and not a lot of episodes.
Yeah. Other big things that we wanted to talk about with this episode.
There's a little moment in this that I really loved. So Mark Strong's character has been relying on Kasha as his truthsayer, and she is his trusted confidant in everything. And then she leaves all of a sudden. And there's this moment when he has to make some decisions, and you can see like the doubt and the fear in his eyes of this, like, what do I do? I don't know how to, I'm not sure of myself. I don't know what to do here. And I really loved that piece of it because she had become such a crutch for him. And then he didn't know what to do when she was gone. And that's just so indicative of Valia's plan and how she's been able to weave her sisters into these positions of power and just shows their influence throughout all of these worlds. And I loved that moment because it just communicated so much about how she's already achieved so many of her goals, and we can just see it through the microcosm of this one moment with this one man. And so I thought that was a really brilliant moment. And then obviously by the end, Kasha dies. So now he's
lost.
There is a vacuum.
Lost puppy.
And we are going to wait and see who fills it.
Yeah. Similarly, on the same thought train, one of the other moments that I love that I think really showcases how much the Ben Gesserit are integrated into the dealings of the politicking is when Mark Strong's character, and I think it's what's his name? The other family. Rukese. When they are having that negotiation about the marriage, and you see that the two Ben Gesserit women are the ones that are communicating, and then ultimately their judgment and their assessment of the scenario is what drives the two men's choices. And so, like, really, these two men are just puppets. They're placeholders for a conversation that's kind of all for show, but the real kind of strings being pulled in the background are between these two women that are communicating with their different hand signals and things like that. And I thought that was such a fun way to showcase just how much these two men trust their truthsayers, but also how much, like, this whole, pomp and circumstance of them having this conversation is really just for show, and that is a fun concept to think about the rest of the Dune universe and all of the dealings between the Harkonnens and the Atreides and whatnot, and how much the Ben Gesserit really have been the ones behind the scenes. And so what we see, even in those movies, of some of the choices that these men are making are really, like, quite informed and being negotiated at a different altitude, a different plane than what's really happening on paper for the show.
Which I just love.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yes, let's go. It's all of these political maneuverings, but it's all behind the scenes, and there's something so interesting about that to me. So I'm curious if we're going to get to see more of that and really seeing them wielding their power in different ways. And you can see kind of that covert influence that they have on them. And I don't know, there's a lot of options for this show. There's a lot of ways that this could go. And I'm curious to see kind of what lanes they decide to travel in, because we got options.
Because there's so many lanes that I'm like, either this is going to intersect well, or you just did too much. For example, all those scenes and bits around showcasing what the sisterhood is like inside and the training that they go through. Like, I think it's all really great world building, but it's a different flavor of what this show could be, that around, like, the rise of how these women are trained, that I hope that actually intersects with some of the politicking that we're seeing also get teed up in an interesting way. Otherwise, it feels like quite a lot of canvas to paint on when we're looking at kind of the internal systems and the external systems that are getting played out. It's just there's a lot here. There's, like, so many realms of storylines here, and I personally think that a version of this show focused on, like, these two girls navigating the training program of the Ben Gesserit would be so fascinating. But it's a different version of the show. And then we also have a version of the show that's, like, really focused on the political maneuvering, which I would be so down for. That's actually the show that I want. And the show seems to be trying to do both of those things and a lot more. So yeah, I'm so curious to see if this is all gonna work together. But there's a lot of, like, behind the scenes at the Ben Gesserit training academy that I personally was like, I wasn't asking these questions. This is really cool. This is really interesting. But I was focused on some other things. And okay, so now we're going to do a little, like, training program segment. And then now we're going to cut back to this, like, strategic marriage of politicking. And then we're going to cut back again. It was a little bit of whiplash there, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm waiting for when these, like, trainee girls they have to be unleashed into the world, basically.
Yeah.
Like, ready or not, we need another woman in this position, so I'm choosing you because we got nobody else, so go have fun. Like, I'm waiting for them to be unleashed into the world, and then hopefully we won't be spending as much time at the school.
Mm-hmm.
Unless we're doing, Dune High, and that's
right.
Cool. I mean, we can get a little like Gossip Girl, but, like, Dune edition going on. I don't know. Fun and dramatic and interesting.
Dune
but not the movie
High.
that we wanted. We
Yeah.
wanted the like House of Cards Dune
That's
edition.
what I want. I was
Yeah,
thinking
yeah.
about that. Yeah. And I think that's maybe why I was frustrated with some of the training program segments. I'm like, this is really cool. This is a different show than I want. I want some like really well-trained, incredibly savvy truthsayers just deployed out, and then House of Cards, backstabbing, plans set in motion. I would be so satisfied.
All right. So we'll see. We'll see.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can live our House of Cards dreams through Dune.
Yep. Yes,
that would
please.
be optimal.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Along the Dune high ride, I've seen some people compare this to like the Ben Gesserit school of like truth saying and lying.
I love it.
It's so funny.
Yes.
They've got their robes and everything.
Yeah. And then, Desmond, he went to another school. So this is like
it's the Goblet of Fire.
Yeah, it's episode 4 where they all come together with
there you go.
all their games that they're gonna play. So we need
got
Desmond to come with his
the princess is showing up to school.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Somebody bring your sandworm, instead of a dragon. We got it.
Yeah. One other thing that I think is gonna be interesting to see the show explore is this kind of concept of what is truth. I think that's really fun and also perfect for this show and this community of women and the stories around it to explore. So, we start off the episode with this concept of like the history of the Atreides that was written was spun out of lies. And because they were the victors, they got to write the narrative. But Valia Harkonnen's like, bro, I got another narrative that I'm trying to write for the future of my sisterhood. And that I think is going to be really fun to see. There's lots of discussion around like who's lying, who's not, how can you tell? And then like what is truth? Is there objective truth? There's some things that are half truths, and what does that mean? So I think that the way that the show can like play with that concept through this world and this community of women that are focused on trying to uncover the truth and see beyond the human facades, I think is really fun. So I would love to see more of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and it's also fascinating, this focus on truth when, they spend most of their time just manipulating other people. So, I think that that's a really fascinating piece of it, that there's this balance between truth and then also bending people to your will. And so how can those two things coexist at once? I think that tension between those two sides of what the Bene Gesserit do is kind of interesting to think about. So it's going to be fun to see how the show continues to tease that out. And then the other piece that I find fascinating is that like Valia sees herself almost as the source of truth.
Yeah.
When Kasha comes and has this vision and is like, hey, things are not right, Valia is really reluctant to accept anything else. She is unwilling to hear anybody else's opinions. And so I'm curious to see how that pride might lead to her downfall. And that's going to be really fascinating to see how the show kind of plays with that and Valia's sense of what is true and her reliance on her own truth rather than maybe the facts of what's actually going on.
I love that. I would love to see that be the downfall. Yes. And it's so in line with the Dune universe. Like I think that concept of like Valia at the beginning saying like prophecy is my truth being so interesting, because we've seen in the Dune storyline at large that it's unknown, like it's unconfirmed whether Paul Atreides is the chosen one, the one that has been the kind of the Messiah-like figure. It's unclear whether he actually is, or because he was prophesied to be, therefore the entire people believe that he is, and therefore he is. Like that concept of objective truth versus the truth that we create is really interesting. And I think that the voiceover at the beginning really is setting up that concept of Valia saying, like what I prophesy. What prophecy is our truth, and that's all that matters. And our job is to make that truth come to be, to confirm all of the things that were spoken. But like, is there even objective truth? That arguably not, but it almost like doesn't matter in this world and in this universe of if it's playing out and that's what's happening, then that is what is right. That is what is true. So that concept is going to be really fun to see the way that Valia uses that manipulation tactic to maybe get what she wants, to say something is truth, when in reality, that's just her desire. That's her will. And she can use the concept of truth to get people to align to that. So yeah, I think you bring up a really great point around the way that truth and will and ambition are potentially very intermixed, and the fungibility of truth will be explored.
It's Valia's world, and we're all just living in it.
Yep.
So we will see what happens with that.
Indeed. All right. Any other last quick things before we give out some awards?
Another piece that I found really interesting was this rejection of the thinking machines and how that has kind of framed everything. That, there was that rebellion and then that I guess battle, and now they live in a very different world without these thinking machines, and yet we see one show up at the wedding and everyone's so scared of it. And so I'm curious to see, because that was such an emphasis in how this whole story started off and how it's framed. So I'm curious to see how that will pop up again. And I think especially like right now with the rise of AI and it's everywhere, I'm curious to see if there are any themes regarding that's kind of like woven throughout the show as well. So there's just, I think there might be something there because it was just so heavily emphasized in this episode. So might be interesting to see where they go with it.
Yeah, I think that'll be really fun to see how they continue to tease that out and potentially where the show leads to. There's just so many directions it could go, and I think that's so fun and thrilling to see. Where will they go next with this very limited runway that they have? Once again, I'm fascinated to see how they can play this out. We shall see.
We shall indeed. We're going to be here for all 6 of those episodes.
Yes, indeed. Okay, well, let's give out some TVNS awards. Sarah, do you want to share a little about the awards that we have for this show?
Yes, so this is another TVNS tradition. At the end of every episode, we give out a few awards. And for this show, our first award is Best Sister. And so we can kind of interpret that one however we want. This is all about a sisterhood. And so we're going to see which character we want to win the Best Sister award. Then the second one is Spiciest Moment. There's going to be some spicy moments throughout, but then also Arrakis, they mine spice on that. So that's another avenue for that potential award. And then our third one is Most Cutting Line. There's some pretty sharp dialogue so far. So we're going to nominate what we think qualifies for the most cutting piece of dialogue.
Mm-hmm. Yes, this is a great collection of awards and lots of candidates, I'm sure, for all of these, man. Okay, well, let's start off with our first category, which is Best Sister. Best Sis Award, given to a character. Sarah, what is your choice?
Yeah, I want to give it to Kasha for trying to warn the powers that be about her very serious nightmares.
Yeah, she tried. She really did.
Yes.
She was so cool.
Right?
Yeah.
I was real bummed because I was kind of digging hanging out with her. Like I wanted her to be one of our House of Cards people that we're just chilling with and seeing how she's manipulating people. She was so cool.
Mm-hmm. I think what's really neat is that the minute she's on screen, you can tell that how incredibly sharp and intelligent she is. And I think it would have been fun to see her clash with Valia too, because she can hold her own against Valia, and so seeing these two incredibly smart women have to debate and figure out how to reconcile these things would have been really fun. But her time was cut short. Homegirl was taken out by the great power. So yeah, but that's a great moment. It's a great moment. Very few Well, we haven't seen very many other people stand up to Valia, and so I think that will be fascinating to see.
Yep.
Okay, I am giving Best Sis award to Emperor Javigo Corino's wife. The glaring look that she gives him at the party when he says that they're going to just overlook everything. I thought that was great. The power of a strong woman by the side of a man in power, you know? Like she clearly communicates to him earlier in the episode, I think, around like, things have gone to shit since you stopped listening to me. I just thought it was so interesting. So she's not part of the Ben Gesserit sisterhood, but man, I think she's a strong, powerful woman, and it's going to be interesting to see her continue to warn him and him continue to kind of waffle and be deluded.
I'm so curious about her because she very clearly has strong opinions, and she does not like the Ben Gesserit, it seems. And so I'm curious to see, because we have Valia and the Ben Gesserit on one side, and we seem to have Desmond on the other side, and his wife is maybe not a fan of either. Like, we don't know where she's gonna land on this. So she might be a fun little agent of chaos that they can throw in there.
I hope so. Yeah, she's kind of a wild card. Like, she could really align to either side, but seems potentially like not for Desmond's cause, but maybe because they share a similar foe, then loyalties align there. We'll see. Okay, the next category is spiciest moment. What is your choice?
Yeah, I want to give this to Desmond for using his spice powers, presumably to murder a child.
Yo.
It's
wild.
It's real intense.
The minute his silhouette shows up on screen, I was like, this boy gonna die. He's gonna die.
Sorry, buddy.
Yeah. Which, honestly, I'm like, let's save Princess Inez from having to marry this small boy.
Honestly, though,
there's some good that comes from it, I suppose.
Yeah.
My choice for spiciest moment is when that young girl, who is portrayed to be a lot more timid at first, says to the one who is a lot more big and flamboyant in her show of power, where she calls her out and says, you were lying, but there is some truth to it. And the audacity that that young girl, who seemingly is very reserved, is willing to speak truth that she sees to this very scary girl, potentially in her class, is pretty incredible. So I'm so curious about this young girl.
Yeah, there's a lot to her. It seems like, because the episode focuses on her quite a bit. So I'm curious to see what else the show is going to draw out of her.
Yeah. She reminded me a lot of Jessica, because Jessica, in her demeanor, is not incredibly forceful and definitive in every step that she makes. She's kind of got a more reserved, quieter persona to her, but we see her incredible power and her incredible cunning and willingness to make hard choices. And so I think that I just love to see these quieter characters that maybe are overlooked get to have these moments of real influence in the plot line, and showcasing that they might be quiet and they might not be the traditional forms of a powerful, influential figure, but don't be sleeping on them, you know? They're going to come. They're going to come and emerge at just the right time.
Yeah, it's the quiet ones you got to look out for.
Yes. Okay, the next category is most cutting line given to a line of dialogue. What is your choice?
Okay, so it's in a conversation between Valia and Tula asks, so it's blind obedience that you want. And my most cutting line is when Valia says, yes. I was like, oh, we're not even sugarcoat. Oh,
yep.
There's no. That's okay. That's just what we want.
Yeah.
I loved the directness.
She is speaking her truth, and she loves that for her.
Is.
You know, she's
she
not
is
sugarcoating it all. Yeah. My most cutting line dialogue, fittingly, I suppose, also given to Valia talking to Tula about Kasha, where she says, "I heard her, and then I dismissed her."
It's so good.
Oh, it's great. It's so great. All right. Well, looking ahead, what are you excited to see in episode 2?
I mean, a lot of what we already talked about, but some other things that I'm also interested in is I would like to see more sandworms. They're so freaking cool.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just so curious about, I want to learn more about Desmond. I know we already talked about this, but how is he able to do what he can do?
Yeah.
Like, excuse? How is this possible? So I think that that's going to be really interesting to kind of see where that goes. And then I just want to learn more about this sisterhood and how they're all connected, and more of the, like, how this kind of works. You know, if you're going to have this vast political system, how do you keep everybody kind of going in the right direction and working together toward the same goal, even though everybody has their different kind of avenues that they're traveling. So I'm curious about the logistics of this and how is this working? I don't know. The show might not answer that because it's not the most exciting thing in the world, but like from a macro organizational level, I'm like, how does this happen? How is Valia running all of this? This does not make sense to me.
Right? Yeah. I wonder if we'll get more flashbacks. That's a great structural question, because there's a lot that the show seems to be curious about, and like kind of the origin and rise of this sisterhood. And I would say it is not fully established quite yet the way that we see it operating in the storylines with Paul Atreides and folks, because I think it's like 10,100 something years later, where the events that happen there, where we see that the Benders are much more well-oiled machine. And so there's still kind of a lack of stability in this organization, how they're run, the alignment, the structures. And so that'll be fascinating to see what cracks are beginning to widen that might topple this thing over momentarily until it gets rebuilt again. Because apparently by the time we get to Paul Atreides' storyline, it is calling all of the shots. So I think that'll be fun to see. Overall, I think my big question is lots of pieces on the board. Is it going to work? Is it going to work or not? Right now I'm wary, but I think episode 2 will be telling. And so I'm intrigued to see it. I'm hoping that all of these storylines are going to be woven together in a really incredible way. I was thinking a lot about The Wire. Who would have thought I would think about The Wire while watching Dune Prophecy? But The Wire in episode 1 does a similar thing where it introduces like a gajillion characters to us, and we get just like a little taste of each of them. And I remember after first 2-3 episodes of The Wire, I was like, I don't know if I'm invested yet. And then by episode 3 to 4, I'm like full on committed in, because you see this interweaving beautifully done. And I think, I don't know, we'll see if Dune Prophecy can reach close to some of that really fabulous interweaving that can happen with all of these storylines. So it'll either be, like I said, hot mess or beautiful tapestry. And so I'm excited to see. I'm hopeful it'll be a really great journey.
And I think the Wire comparison is interesting, but the Wire had 13 episodes,
right,
to weave all of these things together. Dune Prophecy has 6, so
I'm like, it's ambitious.
Yeah. So I'm just intrigued, because there's a lot to be done here.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Yep. I might be a broken record by the end of this whole show, where I'm like, they should have just focused on a few storylines, a few things, narrow the scope. That might be my soapbox for this season. We will see. I'm hopeful, though. It's only been 1 episode. Lots can happen.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And if we are not pleased with how it goes, we can just make our own imaginary House of Cards version of this.
Yes.
And we'll just have a great time.
Mm-hmm. It'll be great.
Yep.
All right. Well, this was our review and discussion of episode 1 of Dune Prophecy. You can find it available on Max to stream. Thank you for listening to today's episode of TV and Us. Our name sums it up. We're big fans of TV and the powerful ways we can connect with each other and the world around us. This podcast is about all of us and our shared stories. So everyone is welcome here, and we're so glad you spent time with us today as we kicked off our journey through Dune Prophecy. You can subscribe to this podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune to your favorite shows. Drop us a rating and review, letting us know your thoughts about episode 1 of this show. You can connect with us on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at tvnspod, or email us at tvnspod@gmail.com. We will be back soon to discuss episode 2 of Dune Prophecy. We hope you have an amazing week, and we'll talk again with y'all very soon.